Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Big Money Stylist podcast. Hello, everybody. That was a weird hello.
Hello, everybody.
I was like all of a sudden announcing like a fight. I don't know.
See, and I'm thinking the price is right. Come on
down. I, once again, want to apologize for my homeless look. I literally was in the middle of, I showered because I do that, from time to time. And then I washed my hair, which if you're a girl and you're a girl with extensions, like wash hair day is important.
It is.
And it's a time commitment.
Yes, it is.
So I'm like, literally, all of a sudden I look at my calendar. I'm like, what's that dot? And I'm like, oh, I got a lash appointment like right now. So I laughed with wet hair.
Were you late to your lash appointment?
Like 5 minutes. But she was running late, so I didn't feel so bad.
Oh, that's perfect then.
So yeah, so my hair is like still damp. I threw on a hat. I got lashes on. I threw on some lip gloss. But this is like me with no makeup and wet hair.
I wondered why you said let's meet at 10:30. Then at 10:17, you're like, how about noon? I'm
yeah,
like,
literally, because I was like, oh no. So
can I tell what happened to me this morning?
Yeah, that was exciting.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah.
So man. So my garage door was open, right? And this has literally been my nightmare. I feel like I've known this was going to happen. So even when it did, I mean, I still cried, but whatever.
I have a funny story after your story, but keep going.
No, perfect. So my habit is I get in my car, I hit the garage door open button because it's right on like my little flap thing. And then I go in reverse. So the thing is my garage door was already open because I brought trash cans in. And then I sit in my car, I hit the button, I go in reverse and I hear, and I was like,
did you feel like the walls were falling in on you or like the garage was eating you?
It almost felt like someone had put like big boxes on top of my car and then the boxes were sliding off. Oh. So here's what happened. The garage door was already fucking open. So when I hit the button, it started to fucking close. And then I went in reverse and it gouged my goddamn car.
It looks like somebody took a knife to the top of your car.
Dude.
That was a bad one.
And I have an M4, which is a convertible.
Why wouldn't the garage just hit and then go back up? Were you pulling out? Like, did it stop?
Because you have to think that your trunk overshadows, like, here's the wheels, but here's the trunk part. So by the time my wheels hit the sensor saying, stop, something's in the way, the top of my car was already fucked.
Oh.
So there's a gouge on top of my car. It's a bummer. It's not a cheap car. So I am going back to the dealership Friday.
A little rental.
I'm going back to the dealership Friday to be like, hey, y'all. Because I called my dad and I'm like, Mom.
I bet they can just buff it out and paint it.
Here's the other thing. Turns out it's a special paint color because I couldn't just get black.
Of course it is. It's like a sparkly black.
You're goddamn right it is. And BMW's like, we don't have that paint anywhere except here. I'm like,
we have to ship that from 7 different countries.
Son of a bitch.
Like, cool. So this is a funny story, kind of similar to yours. We have this Mercedes van, the big ones with like the top things. And we were literally like pulling into like a mall parking. And it was like, there was no other way to go. It was like, but it says like warning, like 7 feet or whatever. And Garrett is driving and he doesn't even fucking slow down. And all of a sudden it was like one of those moments I felt like I was like, what's eating us? What's going on? Because he was going like 20 miles an hour. It literally, like the top of the Mercedes, because it has like a box where you can store stuff in, it just smashed it like a tuna can. Like we pulled out and I was like, are we okay? Like I literally didn't, he's all, oh my God, I just realized like we had that extra thing on the top. That was funny. But I was scary because I was like, we were going so fast and didn't even anticipate it. And then I was like, ah!
Yeah, I sat there and I went, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I'm like, it didn't. So a guy I'm dating is at my house this morning and I went in and I go, hey.
Is that your house this morning? Yeah, I'll need that story later, not on the podcast.
Oh, it got really hot here. So anyway, I walk back in and I'm literally sweating all of a sudden. And I go,
good for you.
I'm like,
okay, keep going.
So I walk in and I go, hey, he's like, what's up? I was like, I just hit the garage door with my car. And he's like, it's okay, because I think he could tell. And I was like,
sweating.
Then like immediately, like my eyes start tearing up. And I was like, and he's like, Ani, I can fix it. Do not stress. It's not that bad. And so he's like totally calm. He's like, this is nothing. And I'm like, I just hit the house with my car, which also isn't true. But guys, don't rush.
Don't rush.
Stop trying to fucking rush.
You know what?
Cost you more time later.
Yeah, it really does. Same with doing hair. Sometimes when you're like rushing and you're doing hair and all of a sudden you're like, this is just going to cost me 20 minutes later down the road. Or you like, the nothing is worse. Like if you're a hairstylist and you're like finished and there's like one piece in the back, you're like, ooh, that doesn't match or blend, especially with extensions. And you're like, but they won't notice. I'll just curl it or I'll cut my way out of it. They'll never notice. And then like 2 weeks later they call you and they're like, or like the money piece is too bright or brassy or you should have smudged or whatever it is. And you're like, so beautiful. And you're like trying to talk them into how beautiful it is.
You're like, I love how bright
and
it is.
And in the mirror, you can feel them looking at the one spot that you're looking at. And you're like, it's so pretty. And you're like turning them the other way. And you're like, it's just so good. And then like 2 weeks later, they call you and you're like, hi, about that piece in the front, I don't like it. It doesn't match. And then what happens, and this has nothing to do with our topic, but they kind of lose faith and trust in you and they're kind of like, well, maybe she was not that good. Whereas if you call yourself out and you're like, and I'm notorious for doing this, and I always say, you work until the job is done. So if I see something and I have like 3 other people waiting for me, I'm like, fuck. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I don't like this piece. You're going to sit here for another 15 minutes. I'm going to resmudge and retone you.
Yes.
And then they're like, thank you for being the professional and being so picky. I'm like, I got you.
But I also think that comes to kind of what we wanted to talk about, just being like your most authentic self.
Yeah.
I feel like the reason
I forgot what we were going to talk about. Way to loop that around. Thank you.
Danielle, I fucking got you. I got you. But I feel like even in those moments, part of the reason that we feel so uncomfortable being like, hey, I don't like this, I'm going to switch it. Or even in work being like, hey, you know what? I fucked up. Or in a relationship being like, that doesn't work for me. I feel like we're almost too afraid to be our most authentic self.
I think sometimes we try to be like too perfect. And when you try to be too perfect, I had a quote on my Instagram this week and I was like, if you try to please everyone, you won't please anyone, including yourselves. And I think that goes with just trying to be aligned and be perfect. And like there's problems that arise and you're like, it's okay, ha. And like tucking it under the rug until all of a sudden you're like, I'm fucking divorced and I burned my salon down. And people are like, whoa, we thought everything was cool. And I'm like, no, I was drowning.
And that part, and I love that it comes back to kind of like perfection. Right. Nobody's perfect, but it's fascinating that everybody tries to be. And I feel like not that I try to portray that on my Instagram, but I try not to. Like, yes, I will post beautiful photos and like all the things, but if you look at my captions, it's not like my life is perfect. I'm like, hey, I have felt this way. I have felt this way. This was messed up this week. I've learned this. Like, I feel like I try to write more about lessons I've learned where like shit wasn't perfect.
But you know what though? I like that you just said that about like Instagram and pretty pictures because it's so funny because Garrett will be like, well, my pictures aren't that perfect. And I'm like, I look at my pictures as like it's a magazine cover. And I want to like draw somebody in. If I have like really off-putting pictures, they're going to be like, scrolling on, like moving on. But if it's like kind of a pretty feed and aesthetically pleasing, then it's like, but then you have a real caption that kind of punches you in the face. It's almost like more like draws you in. You're like, oh, well, her photos are pretty, but maybe, well, okay, she is a human. She has a soul. This is exciting.
Yes. And that's why I feel that it's especially for women because Instagram can be so like only the pretty part of it. People I feel like don't ever want to address like the ugly parts of life. And there are ugly parts of life. But I also know that I never want to portray myself as like the only thing I have are looks. Like I'm just some fucking girl who takes pretty pictures on Instagram. I feel that doesn't feel authentic to me.
Right, exactly.
I feel I have a lot more depth to that. And there are things that I would rather talk about and put out and have it be a topic of discussion.
Right. Than looking too perfect.
Than just like being a pretty girl or whatever. Like there's more to it than that.
But I think that's really what engages people and that's why they like you because it's like, part of me, I used to be like, oh my God, my pictures are too perfect. I look like a fake bitch, like whatever this. And then I was like, you know what? I actually really like pretty pictures. I love photos. I love dressing up. I love clothes. I'm like, so that's also authentically me, like this side of me. But I can show up to a podcast room with no makeup on.
Fucking hobo Danielle.
Freaking wet hair. And I'm like, but this is also me too. Like I was busy and I'm not like, oh, Ani, cancel the podcast. I have to go home and dry my hair. I'm like, we're fucking doing this.
Yes.
So I think it's like important to like really embrace every side of you. So like I think that women in general have a perfectionist side about them. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like for me, that strives me to like become the better person I am, to become better hair, become better as a business owner. Like that, the perfectionist side is not a problem. But also just being like real to who you are and the struggles that you're going through kind of like paint the story, right?
Absolutely. Well, and even I feel like myself, I was laughing this morning. Oh, because I'm wearing a dress, but I actually have like shorts under my dress. And I always do. Anytime I wear a dress to work, that might be like, if I move, it might be like a little risque. I always put shorts underneath because I work with a bunch of fucking dudes. Yeah. And I was laughing this morning, basically being like, I kind of like, I'm such a tomboy. Like you will always like tees and chucks are my go-to, but
you're like a girly tomboy.
I'm a pageant queen on the inside. Give me the big dress and the big hair and give me the makeup and the shoes. I want all of it.
But you're like me in a way where you're like, you can hang with the guys and but then you're like pretty girly too. You know what I mean? You're like, hey, I'm cool with me.
Well, and I feel like there was a time where I almost felt like I had to choose. Like I couldn't be all of it. Like if you're going to be that girly girl with the dresses and the pretty hair, like, no, you can't also be wearing like tees and chucks and with like bicycle shorts. Like that was one of my favorite outfits I wore the other day. Fucking bicycle shorts and tennis shoes. And then until I realized like, well, there doesn't have to be a choice.
Right.
Like I can, if it's me and it fits me, like even when they're like, what's your style? I'm like, I don't really feel like I have a style.
I feel like you're like casual girly, but you're kind of, you can go both ways. See? Like you can throw on some stilettos and you can throw on some tennis shoes. And it's like.
And that's why when people are like, well, what's like your style? I'm like, I don't have one. I wear what I like when I feel like it. So if that's a fucking ball gown, which, Christmas, I'm basically wearing a ball gown.
Oh.
Girl, it's the dress.
I'm excited.
It's so fucking pretty.
I look for any excuse to buy a ball gown. So you're
girl, same. I put it on and I was like, there's not even a bottom to this dress. It's just a bodysuit with a lace overlay. Okay, I'm here for it.
Did you get the orange one?
Yeah, I got the orange one.
Oh, nice.
Girl, I tried it on and I'm like, can I wear this everywhere for the next month? Do I need to put any other clothes on?
We need to get pictures that night for sure.
No, I'm being like,
but you know
serious.
what? I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think because I've always like loved clothes and getting dressed up and showing that side of me. So for me, I like letting this side of me out where I'm like, I can get on a podcast and be like, fuck that, and have a ball cap on and like be another version of me, because I feel like I'm very much tomboyish, but I always come across like very polished, which I think is like, I had to embrace like the side of like throw on a ball cap and who cares, you know what I mean? Because I realized like in being like too perfect was like not relatable. Like people are like,
stressful.
It's so stressful to feel like you have to always be like perfect and done up and say the right things and do the right things, and then it's like it's exhausting, right?
Do you know my favorite version of you?
Oh.
Ugg boot Danielle.
Oh, I have these holy Ugg boots, and it's not like I can't afford another pair, but I like these ones. They're dirty. They have holes in them. I fucking love them.
Anytime I come over, I see your Instagram. I'm like, Ugg boot Danielle is here this season.
Nothing says I don't want to get laid like Ugg boot Danielle.
That's my favorite Danielle. Every time I see it, I'm like, my girl, she's back.
Yeah,
but you know what?
Yeah,
and even something boots. Like that, I'll even address like on my end. If you don't know what I look like, go to Big Money or go to DKWstyling.com and take a look. Like I'm a heavily tattooed woman, like heavily, and I'm a very small woman, so it pretty much covers like a large portion of my body.
Don't tell them about your face tattoos.
Oh, yeah, don't worry, I put makeup on those. I'm just kidding. I don't have any face tattoos. Even I have limits, but I feel that. As a heavily tattooed woman, I used to cover them all the time when I did things. Yeah, like when I went to work, I actually had clients that were so religious and believed if you had a tattoo, you were literally like spawn of Satan. One time I ended up wearing short sleeves because I was like drenched in sweat doing this woman's hair. She never came back to me again because I have tattoos.
I feel like you're off, but you offset it because you're girly. Like
nope,
And in California, I feel like a lot of people have tattoos. Maybe not as many women, but
yeah, I feel California, it's very, very common. But in Missouri, where I came from, it definitely was not. So no, not as much. Now I feel like it's becoming more common, but there was a time where I covered them because I was like, oh, I don't want to like offend people. I don't want to upset anyone. But then I'm like, wait a minute. What the fuck? This is just what I look like now. Like no part of me can change.
I think too, I mean, like I don't really notice your tattoos as much anymore. And I think I'm the only person in our salon that doesn't have a tattoo.
You might be.
Oh, maybe I'll get one. I'm going to get one across my chest right here. Just kidding. I'm not going to do that.
Can we get a teeny one? Like, just get a little baby tattoo.
I know. You know what? Part of me wants to, but I am worried if I start down that train, I'll just end up with a face tattoo.
We'll get like a cute little dainty one, like a little boop.
A dainty one that sprouts into like a wings on my back, and like I'm like I can't say no. Yeah, no, I can't. I know myself. I'm like I'm not gonna get a tattoo. I'm good.
One day, you wait till Vegas opens up. We're doing a girl trip. We're getting you shit can wasted one tattoo.
And again, if that would be a good story, but again, scares me a little bit.
Yeah, we're doing it.
No, I think it's so funny though. Even when we're teaching classes and we talk about like daily form, we're like, what's the hardest thing for you guys to do? And everybody's like, videos. And we're like, but why? I'm like, and they're like, it's just scary. I'm worried about like, I say, but, and this, and then, and I say, and this. And they're like so scared. I'm like, okay, well, what if you just like prepared a topic, you got on camera, if you fuck up, you're like, oh my God, sorry, I'm stumbling on my words. And like, you're just talking to your girlfriend and you're just being you. And they're like, I'm like, you know what's so crazy? I'm like, in the beginning, you think you're going to get like thousands of people watching you. I'm like, you got like 5. You had like 2, like your grandma and your dog watched you. And not to be like rude, but like everybody starts somewhere. And the more reps you have, the better you get at communicating, the better you get on camera. Like, And so in the beginning, it's like the scariest to put yourself out there, especially on video, and especially to like have a topic prepared and not like when you see yourself on video for the first time, you're like, that's what I look like. That's what I sound like. What am I doing with my face? Why am I saying that? Why is it that's me? And you're like, I'm never doing it again. And then you get more comfortable doing it and being on camera and that kind of thing. And that's like, I keep telling my students, I'm like, you have to do this in order to like get yourself out there.
Mm-hmm. And yes, like it's so ridiculously scary in the beginning, but even because the thing is we do daily 4, which is the way that we market inside of DKW Styling Academy. We do that to bring you clients that love you, that trust you.
Right.
And if you're not putting your most authentic self out there, do you really want clients that every time they come in, you have to remember to pretend to be someone else?
Right.
That is so ridiculously stressful. And it's really the same with relationships as well. Like even if you think of assistants or like personal relationships, something that's so interesting, Katie, so she runs like all of the events. She's operations. She's amazing. She told me, she's like, when I started dating my now husband, we'd been dating for a few months and I sat him down and I was like, all right, Sazi. And he's like, what? She's like, so when do I get to see like the real you, the real you? And he looked at her and he was like, I don't know who you've been pretending to be for the past 3 months, but I've just been.
This is me.
Yeah, he's like, I've just been me. And Katie always goes, in that moment, I was like, I'm dating a man.
She's like, no games. This is great.
And
That's funny.
But I think about that and it's true because it's always like, best foot forward.
Yeah.
And yes, put your best foot forward, but also put your most authentic foot forward as well. Like you have to be you, because if not, even if it's bringing a partner on, bringing an assistant on, bringing a stylist on, or like a new like life partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever, if you go through and you put this like facade on and this mask,
and then all of a
that's
sudden
what they expect.
Yeah.
And then when it comes off, oh, well, you've changed. It's like, actually, I was this person all along. I was just afraid to show you this.
Every person, I mean, I got married when I was 20, so I really didn't date a lot. But every guy that I did date, when we'd go out, they were like, I didn't think you were like this. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you're like cool and fun. I'm like, oh. I'm like,
I'm actually insulted.
Yeah,
what the fuck?
I'm like, because I'm pretty, or like, I'm like, what do you mean? But I think that I was never really afraid to be myself, whether it was quirky or awkward or quiet or not quiet at all. Like, I was just like, I'm going to be me. And I was that girl on like a first date that like, I'm not ordering a salad, I'm getting a cheeseburger. And like, that's how I'm going to be.
Yes.
And I didn't really care, but I think that's what people liked about me, is that I was just like, yeah, I don't care. Like, I'm just going to be me. And if you like it, I like it. Because I would never want to be in a situation where you're like, oh shoot, I'm so uncomfortable with myself. Now I can't like let this person out or whatever it is.
And I feel that the more that you do try to put this like mask on or this facade on, and the longer you keep it up, the more you almost start to feel like
pressure.
You almost start to feel like who you truly are isn't good enough.
Right.
And it's almost like you're taking like digs at yourself, like reminding yourself like, oh, you have to act this way because if you were yourself, people wouldn't like you.
Right.
And that's going to show up even inside of business, because then you're going to be like, oh, well, what if I do this hair wrong? Is she not going to like me? Well, what if I do this? If I charge her the full amount, will she not come back? And then now you're giving out discounts and doing other weird shit when you should just be yourself.
Well, and even I liked what you said, how like on social media, like you really want to let your personality shine, because it gets to a point with social media and everything else. It's like anybody can take a pretty hair photo, right?
Totally.
But you never know what's going to get a client in the door. And it might be like you getting on camera and being like, oh my God, I was with my daughter the other day and she said this and this and this, but let me talk to you about this shampoo now, or whatever it is. And people are like, she's funny and I've been following her for a while. And something as simple as just putting yourself out there and telling stories or whatever it is might actually get a client. And so I'm like, if you can get paid off of putting yourself out there, because we'll have artists say like, oh, well, I don't do that. I just, that's not part of my brand. It's off brand. I don't do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, do you like making money? And they're like, well, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, if doing that and it was a little bit off brand and it made you more money, would you be interested in doing it? If it was an addition to your brand? And they're like, well, maybe. I'm like, okay, well, what if you just tried it and maybe you're consistent with it and then you got more money in deposits? Would you continue to do it? Well, yeah. And it's so funny because you're like, okay, because I remember when I first started my brand and I jumped on YouTube and I was so nervous and I was so shy and I was so quiet and I was like, I don't know. And I remember thinking I was going to get thousands of views. And I remember I was like, I got 8 views. Mom, I remember calling my mom. I was like, Mom, I did this video. I was so scared. I got 8 views. And she's like,
can you leave it on repeat, please?
Just keep going. You're doing great, honey. You're doing great. So I'm like, okay, thanks, Mom. So then I just kept going back every week, and I'd sit in my bathroom and I'd tell a video. And then I will never forget the first time I had somebody call me, and she's like, oh my God, I've seen 5 of your videos on YouTube. And she's like, she was like a couple states over. She's like, do you take fly-ins? I was like, yeah, all the time. I do. And I was like peeing my pants. I was like, I've never had a fly-in ever.
Nope, but I do now.
I do now. And I was like, yeah, I get fly-ins all the time. I get people that drive, a couple hours. I'm like, I specialize in what I do and I love what I do. And she's like, it shows. You're super passionate on video. And I was like, oh my God. And that was like the first time I was like, well, I need a deposit. And since I can't see you in person, that's when I started the phone deposits. And I was like, I'm going to need a $500 deposit on the phone right now. And she was like, okay. And I remember like putting it in Square and like literally like peeing my pants. And that was like a really proud moment for me. And it came off of just being super uncomfortable and getting on video, and somebody liked it. And I was like, okay, that was fun.
I remember when I first moved here, it's 3 some years ago now, and events. I remember Garrett would always be like, Ani, you need to have fun. I'm like, I can't have fun. This is serious. He'd be like, you need to smile. He's like, just be you, have fun. I'm like, no, they're expecting you, but now I'm here. This is serious. It took me like a year to smile at an event. Like, it took me so long to be able to let loose. Like, it was so.
That's a lot of pressure though coming in, because like.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of pressure coming in.
Ma'am, I know. But even inside of that, it was so strict for so long. And then as time went on and I got more comfortable and like in like my role, my position with the content, like I'm definitely, I mean, we just ran the gamut of fucking classes. I feel like I loosened up a lot, but still holding a very strict frame.
You needed to start out with that strict frame, because even for me, like I can be like squirrel and like take a hard left. And I like that you are so structured and you keep it on point, because sometimes, and this could go for an artist, this could go for anybody, we get stuck into wanting to listen to ourselves talk, thinking that's going to help people. And it doesn't. If you stay to a structure and a schedule, the value is not in you inspiring them and getting up there and talking. It's about listening to them and having that frame. And so that's kind of what just like you have taught me, because I could tell stories all day long. And I'm like, but they love it. And I'm passionate and they want to hear my passion. And then I'm like, I need to shut my fucking mouth. Like, so I have to like sometimes sit back and be like, where are you at? And you have to be a powerful person to sit in that frame and be uncomfortable with silence and look at somebody and be like, how are you feeling and where are you at? And just hold the space for them. That's harder than just like running your mouth some days. And then in listening to them, you can actually feel their energy, feel what, and you're like, okay. And sometimes people just need to talk it out. Like when we do hot seats, like it's just hot seats is something we do inside of my academy where we literally students will come to us. They have like a massive problem. Like it could be a salon walkout. It could be like, who knows? And the whole point is us holding the space for them to communicate and talk. And they'll literally just sit there and it's like word vomit. And where it's like, well, what do you know you need to do? Well, what do you know you need to do? And it's almost like they need to give themselves permission by telling somebody else.
Oh, always.
And that can be more beneficial than you trying to be like, well, do this. I think you should do this and this and this. Like they're in their own business and they know what they need to do. And you have to just be a really good listener.
Yeah. And that's why even being here, like that first year and a half, it was definitely rough. And yeah, like I know there were some students that are like, Ani Satan, like fuck her. Like they hated me down to my core. And that's okay. Like no big deal.
I feel like...
But what's interesting is the more I loosened up and just let myself be me, that's definitely loud. Like I'll never deny that I'm a little bit crazy, for sure wild, but also very structured. And I care so much about what we do. And I know that comes across. I felt that the more the students actually liked me. Yeah. And like even like traveling at the beginning of the year and going to other classes, that girl came up to me and she was like, I listen to your podcast all the time. You're my spirit animal. And I'm like, that's the nicest thing anyone could have ever said to me, that I'm your spirit animal of all things in the world.
You're
cool
like,
things.
Okay.
But then that also like, that's almost like reaffirming for me that me being me is more than good enough. Like, it's not just like, okay, like that's exactly what I need to do. And then work on myself to constantly evolve. Like we evolve the education, how we train, how we speak, that not being like, hey, I'm good as I am. Yes, I do believe I am, but I also know there's room for growth always. So I'm always like, yay for you for finding like my place, like me, but also now let's grow and be like even better.
Yeah. I think it's like, it's not that version of you when you first started wasn't you, but it's like you found your role and your element and you're like, okay. And I think even you and I used to get in a place where I'm like, Ani's so harsh. Like she's so harsh. And we do events together and I'd be like, oh, too far, Ani, too far. And I always wanted to step in. And what I have learned, even going back to like, just sit back and listen, is I'm like, No. So what I do is I'm like, I sit back and I love not the fear, but I love the tension that you put in students, and I hold the frame for you to have that role, because then I know the students know if I respect you, they will respect you.
Yes.
So that's why I sit back sometimes, and even other trainers will be like, did she just say that? I'm like, let her.
It's fine.
Let her do her thing. Because I know, like I said, like if I hold that respectful frame for you, I know that the students will have that too. Where if I trample over you and I'm like, well, Ani, that's great, but then they're not going to have respect for you. And as the lead trainer, I need them to respect you.
Yeah.
So that when you say something, they're like, oh, Coach Ani said. I'm like, yep, damn right she did.
It's basically like coming out of your mouth.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that
Just
you
give
and
them
I...
an evil eye. I'm like, what did Ani say?
And that's the thing. So even if you're listening to this for, like, if you're trying to go into business, or you're an artist and you're trying to like hire your assistant for the first time, whatever it is, yes, just be you, but also know that being strict and holding a frame doesn't make you less you.
Right.
It actually creates a space of structure.
And people like that.
I love structure.
Assistants like that too. The biggest mistake I did when I first hired assistants is I didn't give that. I'd be like, I'd want them to sweep up hair, or I'd be like, get off your phone, or I'd want them to do something, and I would just expect them to do that, and then they wouldn't, and then there was weird energy, and then I was weird, and so I was like, I felt like I came across really cold, but I got to this place where I was like, hey, I need you to do this, I need you to do this, I need you to do this, and then it wasn't weird. They appreciated that I gave them direction.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I think that, because I hear so many business owners, they're like, but I want to be their friend. Well, you're not their fucking friend. You are their boss. So you need to show up as their boss. Doesn't mean you have to be a cold-hearted bitch. You can still be friendly and be friends, but that frame
But they need you to show up as a boss.
Yes. And I feel like you and I are a great example. Like, yes, you are my friend. I feel like you're one of my closest friends. I talk to you more than I think I talk to most people.
I randomly will like text you. I'm like, Ani's on her phone. I know she is. What's a good show right now?
Literally. So I feel like you are my friend. You're one of my closest friends, but I never forget that you are my boss.
Right.
And were it not for you, I would not be here. So even if we're going back and forth and joking about I already know what's going to happen when this podcast ends. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of jokes. But even after that, I still know, hey, there's still that respect of Danielle's at the top of the pyramid. She is my fucking boss. So with that, great. I hold you to that like respect. And then also I know that we're fucking friends. And depending on what we're doing, I know like how I speak to you.
Right.
If we're shooting the shit, it's all out the fucking window. Who knows what's going to happen? But if we're at work, it's like, okay, let's plan this. Let's figure this out. What about this? What about that? Don't like that. Love this.
I think it comes down to like being your authentic self and like being okay with like different roles and like letting a different version of yourself even come out and being authentic. Because I used to think like, oh, I'm not this person. I can't say this to this person, or I can't do this or whatever. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm obviously not getting what I want by kind of holding back and staying reserved. And so I think it's so weird because I feel like I'm more authentically myself now than ever before. And it's Garrett always tells me, he goes, it's because you have zero fucks given. I'm like, I don't know if that's a compliment.
Yeah,
but
no, it is.
I'm like, but I'm going to say thank you because I don't know. But I got to this place where I'm like, by not communicating, I can't really be my authentic self. You know what I mean?
Well, and I feel I think no fucks given is a compliment. And the way I always view it is, we've used this analogy before, but we are standing on the stage. We have put ourselves in the limelight, put ourselves in the hot seat. We have put ourselves in a place where, yes, it's very easy to openly criticize us because we're in the light. So if your ass is sitting in the fucking bleachers and you think you can throw shit at us and talk shit and tell us anything,
you can thick skin.
You can fuck right off, because we're not going to listen until you are willing to put yourself, your personality, your fucking business, your life, and your family in the limelight for everybody to see. You don't get to have an opinion on what we fucking do, because we are well aware of what we do and where we're putting ourselves and what we stand for and why we do something.
But what's so cool is the more you put yourself out there, the more you can stand in that powerful frame and be like, fuck everybody on the bleachers. Like, I'm tunnel vision. I know what I'm doing. But that doesn't come without putting yourself out there and pushing forward to become the better version of you, the most authentic version of you. So I know we're getting ready to close the show, but you guys, if we were to leave you guys with any kind of like little message, like just try something, even if you're scared. Ani always says, do it and do it scared.
Yeah.
Like, just put yourself out there, see what happens. Because in the end, I made a post this morning, like, in the end, like, I never thought that hair would be the tool to give me the success that I have today. But I think a lot of us, if artists that are listening, we say, oh, I'm just a hairstylist. I'm like, well, fuck you for saying you're just a hairstylist. You could be a marketer, you could be a business owner, you could be a salon owner, you could be an entrepreneur. Like, yeah, hair is the tool that I use to become the best version of myself. But it started with me just being uncomfortable and being okay with having, even when I first started my brand, being like, I have toddler hair and it sucks. And that's why I do extensions. Like something as simple as that. So you guys, I challenge you all this next week, this next month. Put yourself out there, stay consistent, and see what happens.
And if you want to see what we're doing and see Danielle's hobo look today.
I was like, please don't check us out live.
Check us out live at dkwstyling.com. And although we are recording this before Thanksgiving, you'll be receiving it after. So happy Thanksgiving. We hope you had a ton of food, stayed safe, and we'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week.